Hi, welcome to Bias Bash. I'm Marthel Neville. Ted Cruz is calling on GOP rival Donald Trump to make public an off-the-record tape of his interview with the New York Times that some have suggested shows the frontrunner softening his position on immigration. Trump says he will not release or allow the recordings released because he respects the Times' off-the-record policy. But critics are raising questions about why a portion of Trump's interview with the paper was made off the record and how the purported content of the interview was leaked to a BuzzFeed reporter. Joining me now with analysis is Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter and Fox News contributor Judy Miller. Good to see you, Judy.
Good to see you, Marthel.
Well, let's start here. What do you know about how a portion of this interview went off the record in the first place?
Well, I want to first say that having worked at the New York Times for 28 years, it is not uncommon for reporters on the news side and even people on the editorial side to get frustrated or to sit back at one point and say to someone they're interviewing, look, let's just talk off the record here. Tell me what you really think. It's a way of A, getting to the truth, B, assessing character, C, seeing what the candidate or the person you're investigating or looking at will actually say if you don't know. That's pretty common. What is not common is that what happened in that room, the fact that that was leaked to someone to BuzzFeed, and it may or may not be true. The whole story could be invented. But if it's not, and what happened in the room has now become a news story, he said, she said, at that point, the Times is in a very difficult situation, and they have an obligation both to respect the off-the-record nature of the conversation, but also to tell their readers and the American people whether or not the allegation is true that Donald Trump flip-flopped.
So you're saying that because it was agreed at the time of the interview that this is off the record, that material should stay off the record. However, now that it's been leaked, you're saying that it's the Times' responsibility to say that the information...
To set the record straight on the charge. In other words, to set the record straight about what it knows the news to be. And that's a very difficult thing to do. I believe in the protection of sources and the protection of off-the-record conversations. As you know, I went to jail to protect that confidentiality.
Yes.
But when so much is at stake in a presidential election, and the charge, one of the many charges against Mr. Trump is basically that he says different things to different audiences, and he says what people want to hear. He'll say anything to get elected. When that is the charge against him, the paper has an obligation, if it has information that goes to the veracity of that charge, to let its readers know about it.
So in this case, that off-the-record material should become on-the-record
I think the newspaper has an obligation to let the truth trump the off-the-record nature of the conversation. And they have to find a way to square that circle. There are ways to do this, and the most important is the easiest way. Which is for candidates and the papers and other newspapers to ask Mr. Trump to put the off-the-record comments on the record.
But he says he's not going to release
that.
If
he says he won't do it, then you have to assume that there's a reason that he won't do it. And you can speculate about what that reason is, but I think ordinary common sense voters will draw their own conclusions. And that is that he perhaps was not entirely consistent in his on-the-record and off-the-record comments.
So is that fair to kind of deduce to that point that if Donald Trump says, no, I want this to remain off the record as it was intended to be off the record, and if he doesn't agree to release it, then that means for sure that he's hiding something?
It's not for sure, but I think it is a plausible speculation, and it's a plausible inference on the part of the voter.
And Judy Miller, we leave it there. Always good to see you.
Good
and
to
to hear more media analysis on the week's top headlines, catch Media Buzz with Howard Kurtz Sundays at 11 a.m. Eastern and again at 5 p.m. Eastern on the Fox News Channel. I'm Marthel Neville. Thanks for watching.